Hey everyone, I'm Marcus Grimm. At Medtrics, we talk a lot about MSPE generation. Wow, it's so important to our clients. We want to make sure those medical students get placed in the residency programs of their choice, that they can go on and have great careers in medicine. As we all know, Medtrics over the past year and a half has made big changes to how we handle MSPE generation. We use AI right now. AI is used to help us normalize that information. So we spell all the names correctly. So the right names are used. And so that we can synthesize the comments that are in there. It's a lot of work. And how does it happen? Well, let's think about it. On programs like this, we've talked to Tosh, and Tosh has given us the vision about why MSPE generation is so hard and how Medtrics can help. We've had Chris Ducote on. Chris comes in from a CIO perspective and tells us exactly how the Medtrics platform does that from a technical standpoint. But at the end of the day, folks, it's AI. You want to make sure it's working. You want to make sure it's effective. And so guess who I have today on the program? I'm joined today by Puja Sasankan. She's been an intern for Medtrics for the past several months, working with one of our clients, MSUcom, in actually analyzing what MSPE generation looks like. Is it effective? How does it work? And folks, this is an even better story for you because Puja, like many people at Medtrics, she comes from medicine. Matter of fact, she just went through the MSPE process and residency matching as well. But today you're going to be learning about what MSPE generation looks like when we really analyze that data. We're also going to talk to Puja about how she feels about AI being used to actually help craft MSPEs like ours. Puja, how are we doing today?
We're doing excellently.
Outstanding. Now tell us where you go to school and what you're looking to do.
Yeah, absolutely. I go to school currently and going to graduate now in 4 days, but I'm currently a part of the George Washington Medical School in Health Sciences. And I've been having a wonderful time here the past 4 years, but I recently now matched into internal medicine at Emory University.
Wonderful accomplishment for you. Congratulations on that. So before you go to your residency, I want to talk about how you've been spending your past several months. Now, it's really interesting that somebody who's going through med school would apply to Medtrics to be an intern. So let's just talk through that story a little bit. How did that happen?
It was a very personal endeavor for me. I was a part of our clinical practice and innovation and entrepreneurship scholarly concentration that we have here at GW. And a lot of the people that go through that concentration are really interested in forming startups, being a part of biotech and things like that. But I was also a part of my medical education curriculum by being a curriculum representative. And as I was going through that process on the curriculum end, I realized that I really wanted to be able to combine both those passions of medical education and startups and innovative technology involved in medical education. So I became a part of this program, this kind of association that's run by a group of medical students called MD+. And I found that Medtrics was advertising their podcast on the newsletter I got. So I just reached out to the email that was on that newsletter. If I told them my interests and I asked if there was an availability for an internship, and if not, if we could start one. And honestly, the rest was history. About this time last year, I was able to start with an internship at Medtrics, being able to explore those interests in both medical education, but also working with clients and expressing how the innovative nature of medical education can really strengthen clinical practice. And then also learning a little bit about that entrepreneurship side as well.
Terrific. Well, and kudos to you. We mentioned the MD Plus community before, a great community of physician leaders and learners, and kudos to you for being a part of that community as well. Let's talk about this project, MSPE generation. You come on board as an intern, and these days so much of the work is virtual. You weren't fetching coffee or anything like that, so they put you into project work right away. Of all the features that we've been talking about at Medtrics over the past couple of years, like that's the one that people are most excited about, but they also have a lot of questions about. Tell me a little bit about what the project was all about and what you were looking to accomplish.
We wanted to be able to understand what the perceptions of utilizing artificial intelligence would be in the MSPE process generation. Coming from that curriculum representative angle, I was always a part of these committees where I would hear firsthand how manual and, for lack of a better term, kind of gruesome and tedious the MSPE generation process is. And bringing that understanding to Medtrics, we knew that we wanted to be able to see if this was a similar sentiment that was held throughout different institutions, and then how our software could help make that process less tedious. One of the first things we wanted to do was kind of understand, also from a student perspective, how students would feel about an assisted editing software helping with their MSPE generation. And then how the administration on the administrative end would be able to feel about, student perspectives and basically how we can make that process better tuned to the students themselves. So then using this research that we did with MSUCOM, we allowed the students to have their MSPEs go through an assisted editing process where we corrected grammar, we corrected names, and then we allowed students and the administration to review that and allowed them to confirm or deny if they wanted those edits in their MSPE. But what we found is that, there's still a lot of work to be done. I think there was a lot of benefits that came with using the assisted editing because, grammar was corrected. It really did make the process more efficient. Long paragraphs that maybe were redundant were able to be shortened and more to the point, but still retained the actual sentiment of the student that was needed. But there were still other little things that allowed the humanity to remain within that student and within their comments that we still need to continue to work on in terms of the assisted editing that we use. And so I felt like that research project was really enlightening because it showed that there was an efficiency to using assisted editing with the MSPE, but there's still a little bit of work to be done to really make sure that AI is being used more like a tool rather than to be glossed over in regards to sending student MSPEs. Because ultimately, the whole purpose of this is to make sure that students are getting their best foot forward in regards to these letters being sent to residency programs. So we want to make sure that that student's viewpoint and that student's perspective is still being shared and is being understood by the residency program the MSP is being sent to.
What I found interesting looking at the results of the study, most of the criticisms, they're actually pretty easy to fix. You want to talk about some of the things that perhaps the students didn't like and how easily they are to change?
For example, if a student had really glowing comments and there were multiple exclamation points used in that comment, we found that students actually wanted to retain those exclamation points, whereas the AI software was reducing those exclamation points to a period. Or students really wanted to retain their pronouns. If they identified as a man, they wanted to retain the he, him pronoun, but the AI would just neutralize it and make them all they. A lot of these things are, like you said, and like the study found, were really easily changeable. And I think is just testament to the idea that AI is just this constant work in progress. We give it information as humans. And when we're asking to remove biases or to create this standardization to the best of our ability to try to enhance the MSPE, it's also only going to do what we tell it to do. And these little things, like making sure the pronouns are correct or making sure we keep the overwhelmingly positive sentiments, these are really easy changes that can be done on the software backend. But what we did find overall was that process was a lot more efficient, and students were ultimately, in terms of those bigger things like grammar and their names and understandings of the overall perspective of the sentiment of the comment, those are really well taken. And so these little things, we really hope that we'll be able to modify in the future and then just continue to make the software that much better.
These changes that are made to the prompting, what I think is really fascinating is, yes, all MSPEs look the same, but obviously each school has their unique flavor, their unique style. So the prompts were updated, but they weren't updated at the system level. They're actually updated at the school level, right? So each school can say how they want to handle pronoun.
Exactly.
Last question for you on this, and I told you I was going to ask you this one, is you went through the MSPE process recently. And so if we think about the idea of creating an MSPE, and if it's a thoroughly manual process, that data is going somewhere, it's being reviewed by somebody, they are a human and they're looking at it, but they're also looking at dozens or hundreds of those, depending on the school. As somebody who's actually gone through the process, seeing that AI could facilitate this, how does that make you feel? Does it make you nervous? Does it make you excited?
I think that's a great question because from that student perspective, first of all, I think is why I even came into this role, to bring the medical student perspective to this process, because we are the ones kind of awaiting the MSPE before we can finally submit our ERAS and start that residency interview process. And I remember personally, talking to my deans and hearing about how manual this process was. Students actually get to review their MSPE, as we saw, and hopefully make those small changes that maybe were not seen through the manual process because it's such tedious work. But what happened to a lot of the people that I know, and especially the people in my school, is that our MSPEs were only ultimately delivered to us a day before the ERAS was due. This is just how the process works because there's so many students to make sure that the MSPE is grammatically correct in the best places it can be, to make sure everybody's grades are as updated as they can be on the MSPE. These are all little things that add up to much bigger things that do ultimately end up taking the entire summer to complete. And I remember, like I said, as a part of this student council, as being a part of the curriculum representative committee, I was getting a lot of messages like, when is our MSPE coming out? And I had to retort and say, it's going to take a long time. It's really tedious work. And I'm really sorry if it only comes out the day before it's time to submit it. And so I remember the medical students being so, on edge for this. And I think adding this process, use it as a tool to make the process just a little bit more efficient. So maybe the MSPs can come out even a week before submission date. I think will add a little bit more ease to the residency process for the students, but also for the administration that is obviously working so hard to make sure their students are also successful.
Really well said. My final question for you, I know you're moving on from Medtrics here in the next few weeks and heading off to residency, but my understanding is the idea of medical students getting involved with data projects like Medtrics, they're actively looking to replace you right now, right? We're in recruiting. What do you know about next steps?
I feel like next steps also start with, first steps because they kind of work in the same fashion. I took this opportunity because I was constantly searching for something that aligned with my goals. I learned from my past of kind of giving up on my own goals and just not having that mentorship and then deciding that maybe it wasn't a goal to pursue. But I decided this time that wasn't something I was going to do. I was going to keep trying to find someone who would support me and give me the proper guidance and autonomy to be able to pursue and learn these skills that I want to be able to learn, whether it's understanding how startups work, understanding how tech and medical education works, and just using this process also to be able to clarify what my own goals are in the future. And I think the next steps for anybody that's interested in something like this is to make sure, as cliche as it sounds, that you don't give up on pursuing that thing that you really want to do. And you find the proper mentor and the guidance that you need to be able to do it. But you have to think outside the box in order to be able to do that. Sometimes it's not going to be right in front of you. You have to find a way to find that opportunity through a whole combination of different search engines and tactics. And I think that, it's nice for the new recruits that are coming into Medtrics because they had me to kind of anchor off of. But I think that if there's anybody who wants to be able to pursue and start something new, you should never be afraid to ask. You should never say no to yourself. That's always my biggest thing. You should always be able to ask someone and let them say no to you. But one day you're going to run into someone like the Medtrics community where they didn't say no. And then you'll be able to use your creativity and really dive into your ideas and learn a lot about yourself and learn a lot about how you can give back to the community as well.
Outstanding. Folks, we've been speaking with Puja Sasankan. She is heading to residency, and she's been a wonderful intern and member of the Medtrics team for the past year. For everyone in the Medtrics team, I'm Marcus Grimm.